No, Mr. Ramsumer, Brian. Come here. Look him there. Look him there. Oh. Okay. Okay, good morning. Welcome to the viewing and listening audience on our parliamentary channel. I have the pleasure this morning of having our third meeting of the Joint Select Committee on Energy Affairs. It's our first public hearing that we are having live, and our stakeholder this morning, we have the pleasure of having the Woodside Energy Company here with us this morning. Before I turn over and introduce ourselves, I'd just like to say that this public hearing addresses an inquiry into the state's strategies to promote investment for both offshore and onshore exploration activities, including production and prospective production, and the position of stakeholders in upstream and downstream activities. We are joined this morning with Woodside, as mentioned. We have someone from Houston, also part of the Woodside team, and she will be attending virtually, and she'll introduce herself in the time being. So let me ask the Woodside group of company to introduce themselves for the record.
Honourable Chairman, honourable members, good morning. My name is Grant McKenzie. I am the Vice President of Developments for Woodside Energy, based in Houston, Texas. I have more than 30 years' experience in upstream and downstream developments around the world, and I've been in Houston for the last 14 years, prior to which I spent 2 years living and working with my family in Port of Spain. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Morning, Mr. Chair and members. Morning, Mr. Chair and members. My name is Brian Ramsumer. I'm the country manager for Woodside in Trinidad. I have 30 years working experience, 15 years in banking and corporate finance, and 15 years in the upstream oil and gas sector.
Thank you, Honourable Chairman, Honourable Committee members. My name is David Bryant. I'm the Project Director for Calypso Project for Woodside Energy. I have 25 years technical and managerial experience in upstream oil and gas, a considerable amount of time spent on major capital projects across Australia, Europe and North America. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Lochan.
Honourable Chairman, Honourable Committee members, my name is Kellyanne Lochan. I'm in the role of Vice President of Beaumont New Ammonia for Woodside Energy, and I'm based in Houston, Texas. I am attending this inquiry based on my prior role as Vice President and Country Manager for Woodside Trinidad and Tobago, a role which I held from July 2023 until July 2025. I've been with Woodside for over 13 years in various roles across engineering, operations, development, and project delivery. And I have worked for Woodside in Trinidad and Tobago between the years of 2012 and 2017.
Thank you, Ms. Lochan. Let me introduce my team. I am David Lee, Chairman of this committee, and on my right.
Janine John, Vice Chairman.
Stuart Young, Member.
Kennedy Swarat Singh, Member.
Michael De Lavenstein, Member.
Nicholas Morris, Member.
Good morning, Faris Arawi, Member.
Satyakama Maharaj, Member.
Okay, thank you. Before we get into the questions part, the live part, I'd just like to remind, based on my brief here, that members of the public are invited to submit their comments on the parliamentary social media platforms, which consist of YouTube, the channel ParlView, via Facebook, and for X, formerly Twitter, and also on Instagram and also Facebook, as I had mentioned. So before, I would just like to say welcome to Woodside and your team, and I would like to invite anyone from Woodside to give us a brief introduction.
Thank you. Honourable Chairman, members of the committee, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. So thank you very much for the opportunity to appear before you today. We appreciate the committee's focus on strategies to promote investment in exploration activities, We welcome the chance to build upon our written submission by sharing Woodside's experience and ongoing commitment to Trinidad and Tobago's energy sector. Woodside, together with Heritage BHP, has been a proud contributor to Trinidad and Tobago's energy landscape for nearly 3 decades. Our journey began with the signing of the first production sharing contract for the Angostura field in 1996. Since then, we've invested over $1 billion in capital developments located in Trinidad and Tobago, supporting the safe and reliable production of oil and gas. The Kyrie 1 platform, fabricated locally for Angostura, marked a milestone in 2004, followed by first oil in 2005 and commercial gas production in 2011. The Ruby field, brought online in 2021, further demonstrated our commitment to operational excellence and local capability development. Over the years, our operations have delivered more than 480 million barrels of oil equivalent, establishing Woodside among the top 4 producers of natural gas in the country. Beyond production, we have actively invested in building local capacity and fostering environmental stewardship. Drawing on Ruby's regulatory experience and Calypso's early design work, we have shared best practice environmental and licensing processes with local teams and contractors, covering areas such as environmental baseline studies, marine permitting, and stakeholder engagement to strengthen offshore compliance capabilities. Our development and operations teams have mentored local engineers and technicians in production operations, well interventions, HSE systems, marine logistics, supporting the creation of a robust local skills base. In partnership with local organisations, we have advanced supplier readiness and local content programmes, enabling small businesses and community initiatives to participate in maintenance, fabrication support, marine services, and environmental monitoring. The introduction of advanced technologies such as ocean bottom node seismic and digital reservoir workflows have been paired with knowledge sharing and training for local geoscience teams and service providers, equipping them with modern tools and expertise. Additionally, our conservation and community partnerships have further strengthened local capacity for environmental monitoring and social investment related to offshore activities. In 2025, Woodside announced the divestment of the Greater Angostura assets to Perenco, a decision reflecting our disciplined approach to portfolio management and capital allocation framework decisions. This transaction did not include our Deepwater Calypso project, where we remain focused on progressing the development with our joint venture partner. Looking ahead, our primary focus is the Calypso Deepwater Gas Project, which represents a significant opportunity for Trinidad and Tobago. We are currently in the pre-engineering and design phase, working collaboratively to finalise development plans and move towards a final investment decision within the Market Development Phase MDP. Thank you for your time and the opportunity to give this opening statement. We look forward to your questions.
My colleagues to ask questions to Woodside, I just want to state the objective of this inquiry, really and truly a fivefold. Let me just, for Hansard and for the public, one is to evaluate the effectiveness of the existing incentives, license arrangements, and contractual frameworks in fostering exploration activities. 2, to identify opportunities for innovation, technology adoption, strategic partnerships that could enhance the sustainability and long-term viability of exploration projects. 3, to examine the fiscal, regulatory, and policy measures employed by the state to attract and retain foreign investments in offshore and onshore energy explorations. 4, to assess the competitiveness of Trinidad and Tobago's upstream investment climate relative to regional and global energy markets. And 5, to examine production and prospective production, as well as the position of various stakeholders in the upstream and downstream energy sector. So those are the 5 objectives of the inquiry this morning. And so I now turn over to my colleagues who would ask the first rounds of questions, and we'll come back again. So I'll start on my right.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and good morning to Woodside and to Kelly in Houston, who's joined us virtually. As a member of Parliament, and a citizen of Trinidad and Tobago. I just wanted to put in context what has been going on with your operations here in Trinidad, because I think we need to understand exactly what has been transpiring. First of all, is it correct to say that the only investment that you all currently have here that you're pursuing is the Calypso project? You've divested everything else?
Yes, that's correct.
All right. So may I then ask the following questions? I see you've now moved your premises. You all have vacated the Woodside building down by Movie Town?
That's correct.
So what is the head count currently of Woodside in Trinidad and Tobago?
It currently resides with myself as the country manager.
So we have gone from, around 100 persons or more in Woodside's operations in Trinidad, now down to just yourself as the country manager?
Correct. I mean, obviously that does not speak to the global project team that is working on the Calypso project.
No, correct. Because the global team headed by Mr. Bryant really is operating out of Houston and working along with your global team of experts who have expertise in developments, but none of which has been similar to some of the difficulties you've encountered with the particular geology found in the Calypso project, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
So the first point to make is that Woodside's operations in Trinidad have been downsized from significant operations, including your operations in the basin and with Angostura, Ruby, etc. Those have all now been diversified, and we're down to one person on the ground here in Trinidad.
Yeah, what I would say, Honourable Member, is as I mentioned in my opening statement, the divestment of Angostura through 2025. Angostura is a late life asset. The divestment to Parenco allowed that asset to potentially see more life than it would have done under Woodside. So it's a win-win in our opinion. And moving forward on Calypso, with maturation of that project, then obviously the in-country presence would evolve.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm familiar with it because, of course, that is something that was encouraged to an extent by the government, or facilitated by the government, not wanting the asset. Because even before the divestment to Parenco, we had done all that could be possible to extend the life of the smaller fields and to keep your interest there. But the point I'm making is that we have gone from significant boots on the ground and personnel on the ground down to one person, and there has been no public pronouncement of that whatsoever, even though we've asked on a number of occasions of the government to tell us what was going on. Okay, if I may move now to the Calypso project. And I'm happy to see that you're still trying to progress between the two possibilities, and now you're tending towards the subsea and the shallow water platform. One of the difficulties that was encountered or is being encountered is, of course, as you said, the water proliferation and not knowing how much water would flood the wells as you go in, and the need to extract the water, but also the wax formation, which, as I understood it, was one of the things that have not been very frequently experienced across the world, including in the Gulf of Mexico, or as it now tends to be called by some, the Gulf of America, correct?
I think we've done flow assurance work at a preliminary level and looked at pigging, for example. So how would you, if you did, and we're not convinced that the wax will actually form, but if you did have formation of wax, how much would form and how quickly it would form and how you would get rid of it. The water production is a risk, and the flow assurance of how you actually get from the subsea wells to the shallow water platform is acknowledged as a risk.
The shallow water platform, I assume you're going to have separators there as well, separators there to separate the water and any wax formations, but also storage. Are you going to have storage for the liquids, the condensate that you're hoping for?
You'd be looking to export that condensate back to the island.
Straight by pipeline, so
yeah.
Literally they separate and send back to pipeline, by pipeline to the island.
Yep. Yep.
And where would you look to extract or separate between the gas and the liquid?
So
on the platform or on island?
That would happen on the shallow water platform fundamentally. You're taking the bulk separation offshore on the platform and sending two streams back.
Your joint venture, and you've been very careful to say you have a joint venture partner in it, but your joint venture partner, and not name the partner. The partner is, of course, BP. We've seen in the last couple of weeks, of course, developments at Woodside globally, where Meg O'Neill, who we here in Trinidad and Tobago are familiar with, in fact, it was during COVID when Woodside purchased BHP. We desperately tried to make contact with Meg when both Australia and Trinidad were shut down, and were able to make contact and establish a virtual relationship to begin with, and then always met in Houston as much as is possible. But Miss Meg is now heading over to run BP. I assume this has left some element of disruption at Woodside. How do you see this playing out with the Calypso project?
Yeah, we don't envisage much of a disruption here. I mean, it's business at the end of the day. We've got an interim CEO at the current time. We've put out in the public domain that we expect to have a permanent CEO by the end of Q1 this year. That search is ongoing, but we do not envisage, with the changing of hands of what Meg's role is going to be, that there'll be any impact to Calypso at all.
I guess one benefit is that she will be very familiar already with the Calypso project, and hopefully we can keep her enthusiasm.
Yeah.
Questions? You mentioned the Louisiana and Israeli, the Driftwood LNG project, right, which was the Tellurian project. That attracted a lot of Woodside's two projects, I think globally attracted a lot of your capital expenditure, that and the Scarborough project. How close are you all to completion of these things so that we could get some focus here?
So Louisiana is FID'd, as I mentioned, so they're off and running in terms of the execution of that project. It is being done in phases. So phase one essentially is what is being undertaken at the moment. As you mentioned, it was the old Tellurian Driftwood project. Work had been done by Tellurian at the very base level when the purchase was made. Woodside has pushed ahead with that, and it's all going to progress. I cannot state the exact number of where they are with respect to progress. Outside of Louisiana, Scarborough, the FPU, the Floating Production Unit, has entered Australian waters, I think, this week. So they'll be looking to hook that up and get production going second half of this year. And Trion is the other example in Mexico. That's about 50% complete as a project. That's an oil project.
Okay, thank you. I'll
just-
ask Member Young.
just-
We'll come back again, Member Young. Let other members ask some questions. We'll come back a second time.
Through you, Chairman, we've put on the table that the boots on the ground, as you said, local boots on the ground they've gone from 100 to 1. I think it's important to put that in context for the population. This was not an overnight situation. Could you tell us when the downsizing started? How did we go from 100 to 1? At what time period did you start that downsizing?
Kellyanne, I don't know if you want to weigh in here. We can give it more details than maybe we have. No. Do you want to send her a text message? Say re-log in. Yeah, so a number of the people that were part of that acquisition went to Parenco.
Started one commercial one and one I was new.
Sorry, can you repeat, please?
Can you hear us, Kellyanne?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can now. Can you answer the question that was posed?
Yes, I can.
Thank you.
I would just reflect on Grant's earlier comment around the decision to divest the Greater Angostura asset. So that was certainly a commercial and portfolio optimization decision within Woodside. And of course, the outcome for that was Woodside's realization of the acceleration of cash to support other projects, and the benefit to Trinidad and Tobago was, of course, divesting to Parenco, who is a specialist in revitalizing mature and late life fields. And so we expect that the asset's productive life will be extended under a different operator. Now, to directly answer the question regarding the downsizing process, the assets were divested to Perenco as at the 11th of July in 2025. At that point in time, the operations staff supporting the project was also transferred across to Perenco. Woodside's operations in Trinidad and Tobago, the personnel supported both Greater Angostura operations as well as some of our global functions across the globe in the United States, as well as Australia. And so whilst we had predominantly the big part of our workforce locally supporting the Angostura assets, and they moved across to work for Perenco, we did have 10 to 15 people working globally within Woodside, and they have since migrated to either the United States or to Australia to continue supporting those global functions.
Thank you. So I've heard you use the term moved across and transition. So really and truly, it's not a case of we're going from 100 to 1 and 99 just went out of the energy sector, but they moved across in the transition. Right, so thank you very much.
So just to clarify,
Member Young, just let
that happened in July 2020.
Member Young, just let us let Mr. Morris get his.
Just some clarification. So again, you use the term July 2025, but that is actually when the whole process would have finalized. When would you say that you as a company started this process with Perenco to divest? Because if we are saying that boots on the ground went from 100 to 1, and the majority of those boots went across to Perenco in this process, the process as you've put it to us was finalized in July 2025. But could you, for the public, especially my constituency, I represent an energy-based constituency, could you tell us when this whole transition started? Because it's the start of this transition will really put the context of when the start of the workers' transition. So when you'd say this transition began? And this discussion to transfer the assets and so on.
Thank you for your question. The divestment was announced in March of 2025 and then began the transition process to Perenco, which finalized in July of 2025.
Thank you.
So if I may, so it was completed in July 2025. Were all of the workers, apart from those 10 or 15 that were then transferred within Woodside's global operations, were all of the workers absorbed by Perenco?
Yes, all of the personnel within transferred as part of the divestment to Perenco.
Thank you. But the point that I was making is it was in July, if I may just complete my point.
Member Young,
But nobody has put up their hand, Mr. Chairman. If I may just complete my one point.
Just now, Member Young, let us, okay, finish your point.
Thank you. The point that I'm making is that in July 2025, Woodside, Trinidad and Tobago literally closed up its physical operations here and went down to one person. Isn't that correct?
The majority of the local workforce within Woodside transitioned to Perenco in July of 2025. The remainder of Woodside employees working in Trinidad and Tobago on global functions within Woodside continued in their roles for the most part, and that was a phased transition beyond 2025. The office that Woodside occupied in Port of Spain in Trinidad and Tobago was leased, and that lease was transferred as part of the divestment of Perenco.
And in fact, this 18 Scott Bush Street is really an office of a service provider being used as a registered office. It's not a physical Woodside office in Trinidad, correct? Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Mr. Elavesti?
Personal conversations with
Personal conversations. I'm a member of this committee.
Morning. I just referring to said that while Trinidad and Tobago has a well-established regulatory framework, requirements for baseline and post-drilling monitoring for environmental licensing exceed those in other established deepwater jurisdictions, extending timelines and drilling costs. Now, not all of us are as versed in the exploration and drilling as maybe some of you are. I just wondered if you could give me a flavor of the requirements for, when you talk about requirements for baseline and post-drilling monitoring for environmental licensing that exceed those in other places, what are you referring to? And if you could sort of try to keep it in layman-friendly terms, that's one part of the question. And to the extent that you say these requirements exceed other jurisdictions, what pertains in other jurisdictions, what are those jurisdictions? And third partly, and I can remind you of the different parts to it, but the third thing is these requirements, I'm not sure if you're saying that they're excessive or if they simply exceed other, what is required in other jurisdictions. So are they, do you say that they are no value or that they're over the top, they're onerous, oppressive, or is it that, yes, they have value, but it's just some other jurisdictions are not as careful?
Okay. Thank you for the question. So I'll preface this by saying I'm not an expert in this area, but what we see, or what we've seen recently, is whenever a well is drilled, the need and the frequency to come back and check the soil state around that well site to check if there's been further disturbance is excessive compared to other regions. Now, where else are we comparing against? Are we looking at the Gulf and the US, for example? I cannot remember the frequency currently in Trinidad of when you have to revisit the site and the testing you have to do. But if you're on a deep water location, you have to bring vessels into the area. It's pretty expensive, and you're testing soil essentially to make sure that what you said has happened, or what you thought would happen, I beg your pardon, has actually happened.
So does it, are you aware of any other areas or jurisdictions that have require these tests to be done as frequently as they do in Trinidad?
Not as far as I'm aware, but we can get back to you on that if on a wider scale. But yeah, it was noted by our drilling department that it is excessive. Now, is it a small bit excessive, or is it largely excessive? I don't think it's a huge impact, but it is an impact.
When you say a huge impact on the viability of the whole
yeah, it's cost incurred at the end of the day, and it's reports that have to be submitted and signed off by the government ministry, etc., to basically prove that what we're seeing offshore is in line with what we expected.
I don't want to take up too much time, but just to question 5, you seem to be suggesting that the 30-year production base term, the base term under your present contractual arrangement is not sufficiently long, given the ultra deep. I think you refer to this as an ultra deep production.
Yeah.
So I mean, without giving away too much of your sensitive data, what are you looking for? What if 30 years is what you have, and or is a base term?
Yeah.
What do you think is reasonable? Fair to both sides.
The 30 years is essentially a clock that starts at the PSC signing point, and then you've got exploration and appraisal, which, as we on Calypso's experience in deep water, multiple fields can be excessive in terms of timeline and money spent. You then move from an E&A side of things into basically maturing the opportunity assessment towards MDP, market development phase, towards sanction. So the 30 years that you've got doesn't include the 7-year MDP timeline, but when you actually stack up how long it could take in deep water, and you take that away from the 30 years, you can be left with a relatively, and I stress the word relatively, short period to actually produce the field in. Now, it's valid to say, come back to us and we'll give you an extension on the production licence, but that's something that's at the back of our mind, if I'm honest, as a risk, because we can't guarantee that. So that's the downside. The upside is, and the other way it's played in different jurisdictions, is that 30-year clock starts at a later time. So it maybe starts at sanction, or it maybe starts at first production. So you're just moving that clock to the right in terms of the schedule. You're giving yourself a bit more time to actually produce the field, because these need to be big fields, because you're spending a lot of money because of the deep water environment.
And again, when you say, just for the more ignorant of us, when you say sanction,
Yep.
you mean approval by the state or by your own company? Or?
That would be joint venture approval to sanction and execute the project, so FID, final investment decision. We're going to move ahead with this. It's technically and economically viable. We understand the risk profile, and we're ready to spend the money.
Chairman, I have other questions, but I want to give
the opportunity. Ms. John has a question to ask. Ms. John?
Yes. Okay, so Woodside on your website is listed as a global energy company with over 4,500 employees. So I want to really come back to the initial statement from the colleague to my right, that if you take a decision, it will not be lightly taken. Is it because a government changed last year? You all left Trinidad and Tobago. Let me just ask the question, because he made it a very pointed and political question as far as I'm concerned. Was that the rationale that drove that decision? I saw in your notes you said that Perenco is better positioned to do these kind of mature fields. So given that it was raised here, I just want to be clear.
Yeah, thank you for the question. It was not a political decision at all. It was an asset in terms of Angostura that was at the end of its field life. And again, Perenco are probably a better operator in terms of an entity to squeeze more out of the life of that asset than Woodside would be.
And then you said the money you have realized will be better placed into maybe earlier term kind of projects that you are more proficient in developing?
Yeah, of which Calypso would be an example.
Will these projects, are you looking for more opportunities in Trinidad and Tobago at this time, even if you only have one person administratively here?
We're always looking for other opportunities globally. Those opportunities need to be competitive. They need to fit within our capital allocation framework. They need to give good economic returns. That's all on our website, 12%, 7-year payback from FID. So yeah, we're not, we're actively looking for more opportunities worldwide.
Wherever you find these opportunities. I just want to ask a different question. I'm seeing a social spend globally. It was Australian 35.4 million. Can you tell me what you would have done in Trinidad relative to this social corporate responsibility or corporate social responsibility? What projects would you have worked on, and with which communities?
Yeah, go for it.
I think Kellyanne, as a former country manager, would be in a good place to answer that question.
Question, and let me start by saying Woodside, as Grant would have mentioned, the start takes its corporate social responsibility very seriously in all of the areas we operate, and that's no different to Trinidad and Tobago. Over the 20 years of production and presence in Trinidad and Tobago, the local workforce had delivered programs across environmental focus and stewardship, skills development and education. I'll probably share a couple of examples of those. Woodside had a partnership with the Turtle Village Trust for almost 20 years that commenced in 2006. In Northeast Trinidad, we had a partnership with the Arrow Foundation and the Ministry of Energy, where we were focusing on enhancing students' reading and writing skills. And we also more recently launched what we call the local buying program in 2001, and that helped to grow small and micro businesses and suppliers in Trinidad and Tobago. And the focus of that was, of course, creating longer lasting opportunities for local content. So during our presence in Trinidad and Tobago, which extended beyond 20 years, our focus was on environmental programs and skills and education programs.
I'm seeing where you had said, when a question was posed, what barriers exist for expanding technology partnership with local firms and other relevant stakeholders? It was cited that there was a limited pool of local suppliers with expertise in advanced deepwater offshore technologies. Is there anything you would have done? Would you have made an overture to the University of Trinidad and Tobago or the University of the West Indies with respect to, given that we are more or less energy-based economy, that Woodside would have made some kind of overture to assist us in deepening this kind of expertise?
Our relationship with the University of the West Indies at the time when we were looking at Calypso, one of the things that we did do, we supported a capacity building visit by the Ministry of Energy into our United States office. So we hosted a number of mentees from the Ministry of Energy, and we provided them with the opportunity to meet with our deep water operations team in the Gulf of America. They also had the opportunity to visit our deep water operations offshore Gulf of America as well. So that was one of the ways that we were looking to support local capability building in the deep water space.
Any documentation saying that we think if you will expand in this regard, like train people locally, we will be better positioned to be more competitive in this area, or instead of us importing people as the case might be? So we build out our local content?
I don't believe there's any documentation around what we would have proposed and plans there, but certainly the intent would have been to, as the project progressed, to upskill local operations team members to support the operations of the Calypso project as it continued along its life post final investment decision.
Would like.
Just very briefly, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, for the purpose of clarity of the record, obviously I have no issue with Woodside's decision to divest itself of assets that it thought it could no longer commercially pursue. My question, and it's been quite clearly established, and thank you for being truthful here this morning, and the simple point I'm making for the purposes of transparency, is Woodside literally shut down its Trinidad-based operations here. It was previously BHP from 1996 to now, and significant operations where they even occupied a building, A-class commercial space, and went from however many employees, it's over 100, down to 1 in July 2025. And no matter how many times the question was asked of the government, has this happened, we were not provided with an answer. So I would like to thank Woodside this morning for clarifying it for the population, that from July 2025, significant operations, one of our major producers of gas in Trinidad and Tobago and liquids, left our shores, save for 1 employee here, and we're now hoping that Calypso would be pursued. That's the simple point. Thank you.
Member Alwari.
Good morning again, everyone, and thank you so much for your very helpful submissions and for your answers. Thank you for joining us, despite time zone differences, if they apply to you. So in your submission, we're in 2025, in your timeline, at concept reassessment. And in your answer to Member De La Bastide, you indicated that the sanction, i.e. the approval for moving forward, would involve the joint venture approach. We've confirmed that BP is your joint venture partner. Insofar as there is a concept reassessment and a decision yet to be made, would you mind assisting us in, for the benefit of the public, in the very simple milestones against a timeline which would take us to a sanctioning by the JVA?
Yeah, thank you, Honourable Member, for the question. Very relevant. So as we sit here in early 2026, we're looking to kick off a pre-FEED study. That would take us to the back end of this year, post which we'd do a FEED study, so that's front-end engineering design. So all this is refining numbers, refining engineering design, and the capex estimate associated with the concept. At the back end of FEED, you would be looking to sanction the project. So that would take us towards the MDP expiry. So we'll get two major study pieces of work that need to be done before you can get to sanction.
May I, Mr. Chairman? Thank you so much. are there any conditions precedent in the pre-feed study leading to the end of the year, which would be, in simple terms, deal breakers for this project?
Thank you again for the question. We need to undertake the engineering to see if that solution that's envisaged is technically and economically investable. The solutions that we have on the table and the one that we're going to focus upon carries risk. All opportunities or all development concepts carry risk to a certain degree. So the engineering work needs to be done to understand the quantification of that risk and the frequency of the risk. That would then inform as to whether in the joint venture we're ready to move into the feed stage.
Thank you. So would it be correct to say that your engineering study would lead you to what your CapEx, apart from risk profile, would look like? That goes to the JVA. The JVA then makes a financial decision in relation to this. May I, Mr. Chairman, continue? Tying it back to the incentivization and our discussion about moving the 30-year to the right of the slide, is part of that within your scope of discussion? Let me put it simply. Is it that upon your pre-feed study, your engineering study, your CapEx and risk analysis, do you have in mind yet what the numbers look like conditionally to make a project like this happen? In other words, is it likely or unlikely, I know I may be putting you on the spot, to see some glimmer of hope on the horizon?
Yeah, good question. Thank you again. I would say that if we didn't see light at the end of the tunnel, we would not be investing in the pre-feed study work. So we are confident that we can, with our JV partner, advance the technical engineering definition and get to a position where we are more informed to basically say, is this technically and economically viable?
One more topic, if I may.
Let me just come back to you and let Mr. Morris.
Thanks.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Again, we are still on Objective 1, which is to evaluate the effectiveness of the existing incentives, arrangements, and frameworks for exploration. Now, I see in item 6 of your submission, and for the public to understand, item 6, the question posed was, have the fiscal adjustments introduced in recent years, example, SPD treatment, investment tax, meaningfully improve the commercial viability of exploration activities? And your response has been, or was, as submitted, not applicable to Woodside's activities. Just break that down. Is it that none of the incentives and so-called adjustments in the past recent years have really worked to improve your activities or actually impact your activities, which again would have impacted your growth? So I just want to understand, when you say not applicable to Woodside activities, what does that really mean?
Thank you for the question, Honourable Member. I think it's important to draw the committee's attention to the fact that Calypso fields relate to a production sharing contract. So therefore, under the production sharing contract, the commercial framework is laid out and ring-fenced to the production sharing contract. The incentives that were being addressed in the question pertain to the Petroleum Tax Act, which would affect exploration and production activities under E&P license. So hence the reason, maybe a bit blunt, but that's why it didn't pertain from that perspective. It was a license arrangement that governed the response to that question.
Thanks. One last question, Chairman. Same issue really. Item 2. Again, this is just some clarification. Block TTDA A5, you relinquish it. I know many times a block just does not have economic viability because of the geography and so on. Was this solely because of the geography and the gas content not being viable, or could there have been any incentive to, had there been, better incentives, would TTDA A5 been able to be monetized or become operational? Or was it just because it just didn't really make sense itself?
Yeah, it was basically the geology, the location, the deep water, again, the CapEx profile associated with the development of what we had found. And we did spend a considerable amount of time with our JV partner, with Shell, looking at options. Can we tie this back to existing ECMA type infrastructure, etc.? Can we look at a standalone development? We did squeeze a lot out of the development assessment phase for this. We didn't give it up lightly.
All right. Thanks so much. Yeah, thanks.
Mr. Member Alwari.
Thank you so much. Just taking us back to the GVA, insofar as the FID is yet to be made, understandably with the conditions that we've discussed. I take it that your JVA is in existence, and it is with BP as we've ascertained. Is there any conditionalities in the JVA as to assignment of a JVA a partner? In other words, are we at any risk of your JVA hitting the wall in the event that your JVA partner doesn't continue as the actual starting partner?
So the current JV is Woodside 70%, BP 30%. That's the current equity split. I cannot comment on what may happen in the future.
Thank you.
We need to do the work to understand where Calypso fits, both within T&T, within broader portfolios, and that's both companies.
Thanks. Perhaps I may end with this slight amendment of my expression. I was really concerned about the personalities in the JVA and their continuation. You've assigned some of your assets, understandably, to Perenco. I was wondering about the consistency of this arrangement in the event that BP had an assignment interest. Is it something that Woodside would continue to progress on if there was a change in your JVA partner?
All I can say to that, thank you again for the question, is, beg your pardon, Woodside are committed to this project.
Thank you.
Yes. Perhaps just for the benefit of the public, I'll just read the question, Objective 1, number 5. Does the current production sharing contract structure sufficiently accommodate the commercial realities of deepwater projects with long development timelines and high front-end risk? And you said, second bullet point, the application of the windfall element on the profit split table serves as a disincentive for the win-win scenario of high production and high prices. Again, at the risk of showing my ignorance of this in this area, when you say, well, first of all, what does the windfall element on the profit split table mean? And how is it a disincentive for the, well, and what is the win-win scenario that you referred to? And how does the application of the windfall element serve as a disincentive for the win-win scenario? Because that, for me, this was quite vague, and I just wondered if you could flesh it out.
Yeah, thanks, Honourable Member, for the question. The production sharing contract has a cost recovery element, and there's also a profit sharing element that splits between the contractor and the state contractor, in this case being the joint venture partnership. Without going into specifics, there's a tiered level that goes with respect what the government take is at certain production thresholds and production prices. So essentially, as the production increases and the price increases, the state gets a larger share of that split of profit share. What this is saying in terms of response, as you know, in the oil and gas world, sometimes there are extraordinary spikes in gas prices and oil prices, and those sort of windfall elements largely go towards the state under the production sharing contract. And the response is to say, under those extreme elements where there's favorable high prices or production has spiked to such levels, the contract itself under the production sharing contract does not benefit as much as the state.
Okay, so it's less win for you and more win for the state?
Correct.
Sorry.
Yes.
I don't know if that was picked up, but less win for you and more win for the state. Correct. As the profits go up. If I may, Mr. Chairman, just one other question under Objective 3. The question 4. You say the question is from Woodside's perspective, how does Trinidad and Tobago's fiscal framework compare to other deepwater jurisdictions you operate in? And under the third bullet point, you say Trinidad's current framework offers limited target incentives for marginal fields or complex reservoirs. Again, this is quite vague for me. What are the targeted incentives you would hope for in these types of fields that you're not seeing being offered in general terms?
Thanks for the question again, member. I think it's acknowledged at this stage in Trinidad's life cycle from an exploration and production perspective, we are in a mature basin. And as we get into a more mature basin, we have to look at the rules and regulations that govern the industry. One of those pertain to the fiscal take. And the reality is, as you get into a more mature field, the reservoir sizes become smaller. You still have to spend an equivalent amount in terms of drilling development cost, as well as all the safety and environmental protections that you have to put in place. So the cost per barrel, essentially, whether it be gas or oil, is increasing. And therefore, on that basis, operators are looking for greater incentives to be able to go after those smaller pools and reservoirs and to be able to extract it.
All right, so reduce tax or...
Better terms on the production sharing contract, or better terms on the fiscal regime that exists under the Petroleum Tax Act.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Just a few wrap-up questions or points from myself. The first is just to make the point for us here in the committee, but also the public. Calypso is the first deep water project being pursued in Trinidad and Tobago. This is uncharted territory, correct? And as you said, it is a PSC, production sharing contract, versus the E&P scheme. And there have been significant negotiations that have literally been taking place for 2 years around the fiscal terms. But there is always a tension between the company and its evaluation of risk and expenditure versus the state, which of course is trying to recover as best as possible for the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, whose resources they are. But I think it is correct to say, and Kellyanne was there throughout, that this has gone very well during the period of time in terms of respectful conversation, as well as trying to find the sweet spot, as we call it, correct? Yeah, no, I'm asking for their perspective of it.
I would jump in there. Thank you for the question, honourable member. I think it has gone smoothly. I think there's been a high degree of transparency and there's been engagement. And the transparency is what helps both sides at the end of the day, is to show your hand to a degree as much as you can and explain what the problem actually is.
Correct.
And identify a number of solutions and then see if you can get an overlap.
And that's certainly how we operated. Now, one point that I think should be made, Mr. Chair, at this stage is in the restructuring of Atlantic LNG, which has never taken place anywhere in the world, the restructuring of Atlantic LNG by the previous administration, one of the critical factors that made Trinidad and Tobago, in particular to Woodside, attractive that didn't exist before, is third-party access to the facilities that you could bring your gas and get LNG at the end. And of course, that is dependent on a commercial negotiation. But that new formula of third-party access, can you tell us how Woodside viewed that?
Thank you, member, for the question. It certainly broadens the scope and the ability of the operators and the joint venture partner to be able to market its gas both to the LNG franchise through a tolling mechanism, as you've stated, as well as to the NGC in terms of the downstream as well. So it broadens the opportunity in the marketplace to be able to sell the gas into a diversified portfolio of commodities.
Thank you. And my last, and of course, that helps in the whole commercial arrangement because it now gives you more options, right?
Correct.
My last point to the point you made previously, Mr. Ramsumir, when you were talking to Member De Labastide and saying, you know, when it comes to end of life of a reservoir, but there are certain things that can be done, whether it be drilling, horizontal drilling or vertical drilling, etc., different types of drilling, but also cost recovery at that late stage. Woodside and BHP benefited with the government at the time in coming to the government and having those discussions, and then commercial arrangements and amendments were made to PSCs, which are live examples of then allowing an extension of life on the asset. Isn't that correct? And I think Kelly would say, okay, Grant, you may know the answer, or Kelly.
Kellyanne, you want to speak to that question?
Yes, Honourable, no, that's correct.
And again, I would say that harks back to the transparency. Whether you're at the very front end of a project or the very last drop of hydrocarbons, you need to keep those discussions going, and it needs to be a discussion. It needs to be a two-way involvement, not just one way.
And I'd like to thank you all for that. And in those difficult periods of us finding, even though there was tension, finding the ways to extend the life of the reservoirs.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Raj Singh?
Thank you very much, Chair. My colleagues asked some of the questions that I wanted to ask, but just to say, or just to continue where Member Young would have left off, you continue to have good conversations with the regulatory bodies here, and you continue in the vein that you have invested in here in making sure that you have a good relationship and so on. So thank you very much for that. I have been out of Trinidad for 15 years, so I'm now catching up on quite a few things. But just to say, therefore, that many organizations like yours globally would enter into new markets and exit existing markets as a continual assessment as to the business model as you go globally, yes? And as Member Young would have suggested, you are the forerunners in our deep water exploration here in Trinidad and Tobago, which would bring about some new sets of challenges. As Member John would have asked, it will require different types of capacity issues, regulatory issues, and would bring about some new challenges that we would now have to explore together.
Yeah, I think thank you for the question. It's a fair commentary for Trinidad. We've got extensive deep water operations around the world. They're not all the same. There are some degrees of similarity for the things you need to be careful of technically. But it's not a cookie cutter approach at the end of the day. But we do have significant experience going all the way back, decades of lessons learned in deep water operations, and it is different.
Thank you. And the current global assessment that you would look at over the last 10 or 15 years, in terms of markets that you would enter and markets that you would exit, and the reallocating. Because I'm looking at the end of 2024, your concept definition, your pivot project philosophy was lean facility, resource high grading, pragmatic risk approach.
Yep.
Could you speak a little bit about that? What was your thinking as you completed 2024, as you move into the new concept formulation with 25?
Yeah. So that was basically a consequence of the post-COVID world that we were living in and market constraints that we got from the marketplace as we approached reputable suppliers. CapEx costs, I beg your pardon, had increased significantly. That then puts a lot of downward pressure on the economic viability of any project. So we've seen this across the board, not just in Trinidad, but we've seen it in other operations, other projects that were actually post-sanction at that point, incurred some serious schedule delays, for example, as well as cost impacts. Yeah. So the refresh, to your question, the refresh at the end of 24 into 25 was basically, can we get this to work? What would it take? And that was the outcome. The outcome was, we can do this leaner. We just need to challenge how we go about this without compromising safety or health and environmental in any way, shape or form.
Because I ask that because I think a lot of us sometimes look at the politics of things, but I think after COVID, a lot has changed in terms of how businesses operate, types of human resources, your work models, and the aim of many of these things is to make sure that our organizations operate at a greater levels of profitability, given some of the constraints, and because the work models prior to COVID, would require a certain type of expenditure, and the work models after COVID would have sort of challenged some of those preconceived definitions.
Yeah, thank you for the commentary. I'd agree with everything you said there. It was a new world when the dust settled post-COVID. Things were significantly different. They were different in terms of the way people worked and the cost of things and the schedule associated with things and getting it done. And these are deep water developments are complex animals at the end of the day. You have to be very careful. We're not going to sacrifice any safety. That's paramount to Woodside. So.
Sure.
Instead of 2026, in terms of rolling out so many questions that you've answered, what are some of the milestones 2026 that you expect to hit?
So the key aspect is getting through the pre-feed study work that we're looking to kick off in the near future. That would inform more engineering definition as well as revised numbers with respect to capex, etc. And it will give us more definition within the JV of the viability technically as well as economically of the project.
Okay, final question. Allow Member Morris to ask that final question before we bring our proceedings to a close for this morning.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Again, Objective 4, which is to assess the competitiveness of Trinidad and Tobago's upstream investment climate relative to the region and global energy markets. Question one there was, what comparative advantage or disadvantages does Trinidad and Tobago offer in relative to your operations in Australia, Senegal, and Mexico? And you listed that, one, environmental and licensing approvals can be lengthy and fragmented, slowing execution compared to other jurisdictions. 6 days ago, actually last week Thursday, the Cabinet would have announced the Energy Accelerator Hub, which would be a committee, an oversight committee at the Ministry of Energy to ensure that all of these licensing approvals and regulations can be fast-tracked. Would this impact your operation and really help us to, and in your view, would it make our investment climate more competitive, given that you've listed this as one of the issues and now the Cabinet has, announced such a program?
Thank you, Honourable Member, for the question. We definitely see this as a benefit where the government has its various agencies coming together under one umbrella to be able to expedite approvals, and certainly as we get into a development phase where those approvals will become critical to the success of the project, especially for project schedule, this is a welcomed approach, and we hope to certainly benefit from it in terms of the project and getting the project keeping it on schedule as much as possible.
Thank you. All right, as we bring this meeting to a close, before I say my thank yous, I'd like to ask Woodside to give a brief closing remark.
Yes, thank you, Honourable Chairman, members. I thank you again for the invite. It's been a very interesting, fruitful discussion. I appreciate all the questions that have been asked. They're all on point, which is great to see. We have an engaged government, which is great to see. We are excited about Calypso. We are pushing it forward. So yeah, I can just only say thank you very much from all of us.
I want to thank you all for being very open and transparent to us as a committee. I know certain members would have put you on the spot at times, but I know you weathered it well. So I want to thank also Ms. Lochan from far away from Houston for joining us this morning. I know she has a wealth of information, being the last country manager for Woodside. I'd like to thank my committee members here for their frank and open questions to Woodside, and also the staff of Parliament for the support that they have given this committee this morning and beyond. So I want to thank also the viewing and listening audience for partaking this morning. I know we have been at this live hearing for just over an hour, and I want to thank the listening and viewing audience for partaking in this morning's proceedings. I want to again thank all, and as we adjourn this meeting, I want to thank you, Woodside, for being here this morning. Thank you, Ms. Lochan, as we adjourn and suspend. Thank you. That's it? We done? Whew, how was it?
Chairman, are we after or we just finished?
No, we had already discussed.